In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to turn you into a Webflow Pro. Webflow just recently updated their entire designer with a new interface and new features. So even if you're a seasoned Webflow user, this video is going to be the best way to get you up to speed. And if you're completely new to Webflow, by the end of this video, you'll have everything that you need to be building websites in Webflow. So let's get into it. All right, let's get started. So we're in my Webflow dashboard here, and what we're gonna do is come up and click Add New Site, the blue button here in the top. And then for this example, we're just going to add a blank site. Now this is going to give you like a suggested site name. It's not important what you name it right now, and this can always be changed. So we'll just keep this as Peyton's Cool Site. And we're going to go ahead and create this. All right, so once you create this site, it is going to open up the Webflow Designer. Now this is new. This has been completely redone here recently. And so what I want to do is I want to walk you through all of the different toolbars so you know exactly what everything does. Because once you understand that, using this tool is going to be so easy. So first, what I want to do is cover our left-hand toolbar here, and then we will cover the top toolbar, and then we will finish up on the style toolbar. And then we're actually going to dive into the tool and start building some stuff. And by the end of this, we should have a nice little landing page, and you should know everything that you need to know about this tool. Now, if you want to use the chapters, you can actually fast forward to the part that you need the most. If you already understand the toolbars, feel free just to fast forward to the next part. All right, so here on the left-hand toolbar, there are only a few things that you need to know to get started. The first is add element, and this is basically a drag and drop feature to pull in whatever elements you need. So you can see we've got structural elements, we've got what are classified as basic elements, typography elements, so you can pull in a header, a paragraph, a block quote, CMS, which is your content management system, and so that's how you can create dynamic pages and dynamic content, and so we'll cover that in another video, and then I'll also link down below. I've already got a tutorial on that. We've got our media elements, everything that you need to build a form, and then what are classified as advanced elements. So this is search functionality, background video, light boxes, code embeds, nav bar. So what you can actually do is you can just click and drag these over. I'm gonna drag a section over, and then you can see that it is going to make it appear right there. Now, when we're building websites within Webflow, we're using something called the box model. So everything is nested inside of something else. And so what you can do is then take a div block, and I can place this inside of the section, and then these are gonna be nested within each other. Now, you're going to be able to see all of these elements with this next option, which is your navigator. So now you can see we've got the body, which every website has, and then the section that I place, and then within this section, I have that div block. And so this is a really easy way to keep track of all of your elements, especially as your page gets more and more elements. This is the easy way to find what you're looking for, whether you need to erase something, move something. All right, so let's hop up here now to our pages icon. Now, the pages icon is pretty self-explanatory. This is where you're gonna see all the pages of your website. Now, when you're building a Webflow site, there are a few different types of pages. There are static pages, which are completely unique, and everyone can look completely custom. And then what you're going to have is your CMS pages, which you won't see here because we have not set up our CMS yet. CMS pages are dynamic content. We'll cover that in another video. And then we have our utility pages, which are our password protected page, if that's something you're using, or your 404 page. And then you'll see there are a couple other options if you add additional features like e-commerce or your membership feature. You'll have user pages. The next is your components, which used to be called symbols, and these are basically just reusable sections. So what you can do is you can create a component, and then you can just put that same component, whatever combination of elements that are in that component, and then you can just place them throughout the site. And then if you make any change within that component, it's going to change all instances of that on all the pages of your site. So this is a really useful feature, especially at scale when you have more pages. You'll definitely want to use components. Now, there are only a few more that we want to cover. The next is variables. Now, variables allow you to make reusable sizes, colors, and fonts. And so what I'll do here is let's just go ahead and add a color. And you can see here that you can name this color. So let's just go ahead and give this the name of purple. And then we're going to click on the value here, and let's just drag this over to kind of like a purple color. And let's go ahead and finish that. And then that variable is going to be saved, and I'll show you how you can reuse those variables to quickly grab the different colors and styles that you want. All right, the next option you have over here on your toolbar is your assets. So this is where you're going to upload all of your images and videos, and then you can just drag and drop those assets from this panel right into your website. So it's really nice that you'll have like your library here of everything. You can search for assets by name, and using this is pretty straightforward. All right, so the rest of these tabs are your logic, you've got your users tab, you've got your ecom tab, and then you've got your apps. And so you're gonna see all of your apps right here. And that's really all you need to know about this left-hand toolbar. All right, so next is our top toolbar. You can quick jump to different pages by clicking this here. And then up at the top, you're able to see what your site looks like on different screen sizes, okay? And this is how you're going to make your site responsive. Here, if you click these three dots, you're going to be able to add larger breakpoints. And then over here on the right, there are only two things you need to know. We've got toggle preview, which this is going to allow you to see your site live and actually interact with it and get a preview of what it looks like. And then you've got your publish over here, which you're going to publish to either a staging domain, or once you connect your custom domain, you're going to be able to publish it to that domain. All right, so now let's talk about our style toolbar over here. This is where you are going to affect and manipulate the style and look of every element on your website. And so this is the most important part of Webflow. And they have made some recent updates that have made it much easier to make things look exactly as you like them. This is basically manipulating the CSS code of a website. And this is by far the easiest way to do this. And so there are just a few things that you really need to understand. First is our style selector. Now you'll also hear these identified as classes. And what these classes do is help you specify what elements are. And if elements are sharing the same class and then you change their style, all elements that share that same class will update. So for example, if we pull a div block in here, let's just pull one right here. And really quickly, for this example, we're going to give this a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. And then we make this style selector or this class, we name it red box. And then I'm going to copy and paste this over so we have a second div block right below it. Both have the same class of red box. So if only one is selected and we change the background color to red, both of those are going to change. And so that is the power of classes. Is if you have the same elements that are used throughout your website, if they all share a class, you can make specific changes that will affect all of them, okay? And so this is really important to use because you don't want to give every new element a brand new class because then making updates is going to be an absolute nightmare. Now, so you further understand the way that classes work, let's actually go back to these and let's just give these a class of box. So these are just our generic boxes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to give this top one a secondary class, which is red, and this bottom one a secondary class, which is blue. So now if they have different secondary classes, this one will stay red, but the one that I gave the secondary class of blue, if I come over here and change the color blue, that is the only one that will be changed. And so sometimes you're going to have multiple classes and you want to, of course, keep these as easy to understand as possible. But if you learn how to properly use these classes, it's going to make building and rebuilding and updating your site so easy. All right, so the next thing that you need to know is your display. So what I'm going to do is bring our boxes up here into a section to show you how this works. And we'll get rid of this div block. All right, so we have this section, and at its just base normal state, the way that it's set up, things are going to just take up an entire line and fall on top of each other. So if I click this section, you're going to see that the display is set to the default block, and what it's going to do is it's just going to throw those blocks in on top of each other. But if you select these different display options like flex, it's going to open an additional menu where you can affect the way that these things lay, whether you want them horizontal or vertical. And let's just say we want them horizontal, but we would like them to sit in the middle or on the right. You can adjust that by these alignment and justify buttons. You can also equally spread them out. So this is going to be really important for your layouts because this is different than just a typical drag and drop website builder like Wix. You actually have to use this box model and then determine how things are laid out. And so oftentimes this will mean you might have a section, and then within that section you have a div, and within that div you have another div and another div, and then you've got some text and a button. So you're gonna have multiple levels of boxes to get the perfect layout. And again, if you do this properly, it's going to make it so easy to make this responsive and look good on any screen size. So while this might seem like kind of a pain, this is the way that websites are meant to be built. And if you do it with a tool like Webflow, you're going to be much happier with the result. Now, there are a few other display options. You've got your grid option, which is going to give you a number of different columns and rows, and then you can add to those if you would like. And then over here, you have your inline block, which is just going to stack them on top of one another. So for me, 99% of the time, I just use flex, and it's easy to tell these elements exactly where I want them to go. Okay, so scrolling down, we have our spacing. This is really self-explanatory. If you want padding on the inside of our section here, you can just drag these, and I'm holding the enter button right now to move all four. And you can see, actually, let me change the background color of the section so you can see that a little bit better. Let's change it to a slight gray. Perfect. So coming back up here, I can adjust the padding on the inside, or I can adjust the margin on the outside, okay? Now, if I don't hold enter and I just move one of these, it will just do, just the top, just the bottom, and it's going to make that padding and margin for us. Okay, so let's shrink this down a little bit. Now down here we have our sizing. Let's just say, for example, we want this gray section to take up about 90% of the screen here. We don't want to add a ton of padding to make it fill up that space. That just makes things really messy. And then if you add too many additional elements, it's just going to squish things out further than you want them to go. So instead of adding this padding, I'm gonna take this back, what we can do is use our height. So let's just say we want this to be 700 pixels high, and it's going to adjust the height of that. Now, if I come back up here, I can actually align things to the center of this box, and that's a much cleaner way to do this. Now, I almost never set things at a hard pixel width or height. There are a lot of different variables that you can use for this, but another example of this would be height. You can actually set this to 90 VH, which is viewport height, and then it's going to take up 90% of whatever the viewport height is, okay? Now you've got your width and your height, so if you want to set your width to, let's say, 80%, you'll see it'll only take up 80% of the width. Now another really effective way you can do this is, let's set these back to auto, not 0, but we want to set them back to auto, is our minimum width and minimum height, and then maximum width and maximum height. So the way that these work is, if you have your minimum width set to let's just say 100 pixels, it says that this will never get smaller than 100 pixels, okay? Now, if you set a maximum width of, let's say, 500 pixels, you'll see it shrinks this down because this section can now never be wider than 500 pixels, okay? So let's set these back to none and 0. And then if you want to do a minimum height, another effective way you can do this is, let's just do a minimum height of 70 VH, which is, again, viewport height. And then it will never shrink to smaller than that 70 viewport height. And you can do the same for your max. All right, so let's keep going. Scrolling down here, we have our position. Now, this is a tricky adjustment to make, and we need to be careful with how much we use this, because the way that this works is, let's go ahead and set the section to relative. And then the way that this works is, if I select a box, position absolute, what I can do is I can actually drag this box anywhere I want it to. And so this almost becomes more of like a drag and drop. Like if I want this exactly right here, I can place it right there. Now, the reason we want to be careful with this is setting things at an absolute position. So when we're looking at different screen sizes, it can make it a little bit wonky, okay? So this is only used for fine adjustments. So there are a few different options down below here. You can set this to top left, top right, bottom corners, and then you can make these finer adjustments, again, by pixels, percentages, rems, whatever you prefer to use. Now, there are a few other options. You can set this to fixed, sticky, relative. Those are all options that we will go through in another video. But again, this is something that you're not going to use, if at all costs. If you can create your layouts without using these absolute positions, it's going to be much more responsive. So let's go ahead and set this back to static. And let's keep going. So down below, we have our typography settings. So let's go ahead and pull in a heading up here. We'll just put it right in the middle. And we'll just type in, this is my first heading. Alrighty, so you have all of your options here to change the fonts, to change the weight, which only some of your fonts will have depending on what you've uploaded. Only some fonts will have different weights. Got bold here. You can affect the size. This can be done by clicking up or down on your keys, or you can type in the specific number that you want. And you can do line height as well. And then you've got color, alignment, all of those things. And then you've got a few additional styling options. Now, when I put in a heading, I'm going to want to make sure that I set a new class for this heading just to make sure that I know exactly what the element is. And then if it's reused throughout the site and then I make adjustments, it's going to change throughout the entire site. So let's just go ahead and call this one main heading. And then you can see if I have, actually, let's drag another heading in here. So now I've got a new heading, and I'm going to set our section to vertical so this doesn't look so crazy. All right, so I have this main heading right here with the class main heading, and let's go ahead and change this to a red color, okay? Now this new heading that I just placed does not yet have a class, but if I come in here and I select this existing class main heading, it's going to match the style of the first one. So now, let's say that this is on another page. Even then, when I adjust any of the styling of it, it's going to change both of those at the same time. So changes can be made really, really quickly. All right, let's erase this and continue to scroll down. We've got a few additional options. You can add text shadows. Right here, you can add background colors or images. So you can see right here, we've got our backgrounds. You can add a gradient, both linear and radial. You can add an image and then select the background image. And then you can also just select a color, which we had done before. Let's go ahead and select a black color for now and get rid of this image. And that's how you're going to be able to adjust that. Now we have this, which is named section. We're going to want to make sure that this has a good class as well. So let's put this as hero section. All right, so let's continue to go down. You have your border radiuses. If you drag these, let me drag this up, you'll see that it rounds off those corners, and you can do this to any element. And then we've got our borders, which you can add specific borders here. Oh, and you can also see the variable that we created right there, the purple variable. If I make this larger there on the bottom, you'll see that it's adding that border or that stroke. So let's get rid of that. And then down below at the very bottom, you just have a number of different effects. You can adjust the opacity of things right here, make things invisible. You can add box shadows, all of your transforms, so you can make things skewed or rotate them. And then you have different things like transitions and filters, which you can just mess around with and see how those all work. Okay, so just like that, we understand all of the toolbars, all of the features, and so now you're ready to dive in and actually create a site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase these elements. I'm going to erase this class and set this back to a default, and then we are going to make a nice little hero section. So let's go ahead and set our min height of the hero section to 85 VH. Now we've got our main header, and I am going to remake a hero section for my company, SEMflow. SEMflow is actually an SEO plugin for Webflow. So let's just type in the only SEO plugin for Webflow. All right. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is give this a specific class. So main header home. And then what we are going to do is scroll down here and let's give this a color of white. Now, let's just say that I don't like any of the fonts that it has here. What I can actually do is come back here to the site settings, and then I can access any Google fonts, and you can also upload different fonts from Adobe and a few other places. So let's come in here to choose a font from list. You can see that's right here in this fonts tab. And I am looking for a font called Young Serif. So I'm going to click that right here. I'm going to click Add Font, and it says Added Young Serif Regular. And then I'm going to come back here to the designer, which is this purple button. All right, so now that this is loaded up, I'm going to select my header again, scroll down here to my fonts, and I should find that new font Young Serif right here. All right, so let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And what I'm not liking is how wide this is getting. So what I'm going to want to do is let's actually put this inside of a div block. And this div is going to be just the hero div. And let's put this inside of here. Now what I can do with this div is set a max width. I think that will be okay. And what I'm noticing is the line height of this header is not great. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to come here to the hero div and I'm going to set this to flex and then make sure that it's vertical because I'm going to have more elements that come underneath this header. And then I'm going to set this to center. Now I can come to my header and center align the text. And I'm not really liking the way that this is breaking. So what I could do is I could just shrink down the max width just enough to make sure that that breaks right there. And then that's going to look nice. Now let's go ahead and add a paragraph underneath this. And we're going to call this the hero subheading for a class. And then let's go ahead and use maybe just Lotto for our font. And then what we're going to do is kind of give this like a slightly pinkish, maybe a slightly purple font. Perfect. And then we're going to make this a little bit larger. I'm going to center this as well. I'm going to increase the line height because that does not look great. And then for our subheading, let's just put... All right, so what I want to do is click on our header now, and I'm going to add a slightly larger margin to the bottom. You can see that's going to space things out. 30 pixels, that looks great. And now let's go in here and let's add a button. So I'm going to drag and drop this button. You'll notice that this shows up way down here, and the reason is I didn't put it inside the div block. So I want to make sure that I get this right inside the div block, and that is going to look nice. Now let's add a little bit of margin below this subtext as well, maybe 40. All right, I think that looks good. And now let's go ahead and stylize this button. So let's make this say start my free trial. And then we want to stylize this. Now what I could do is scroll down here to background color and click on this little purple dot. And I could use this variable if that's the one that I like. I don't think that that one shows up very well. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to disconnect this. And for the background of this button, I actually want to add a gradient. So I'm going to click plus right here. I'm going to select a gradient here. And then I am going to select one side of this gradient. And I'm going to make this like a kind of like a darker purple maybe. And then on the bottom, I am going to make this maybe a little bit more blue. And of course I'll have a color palette for this, so it'll be a lot easier to do. What I want to do then is scroll up here for this button, and I'm going to add a little bit more padding on the top and the sides. Scroll down, and I want to add a border radius to make that slightly rounded. And then I think it will look good if I do some sort of an outline. So let's come down here to borders. And then if we added, that white doesn't look great, but if I adjust the opacity down here, I can give it just like a very slight outline. There we go. I think that looks good. All right, so if I want to adjust, actually let's come up here and let's preview this, and you can see that now if I hover it, this is a button, but when I hover it, the style doesn't change at all. So let's come back here to the designer, and what I want to do is select the button, come over here to my style selector, which is where we put our classes, and party foul here, I need to add main button, so that's a specific class. And then if I come here to this arrow on the right, I can click the hover state. What this is going to do is this is going to change the style of the button when you're hovering over it. So now that that is set to hover, I'm going to scroll down to my linear gradient. And what I want to do is I just want to make this a little bit brighter when they hover over it, okay? And so now when I come up here and preview this, you're going to see that when I hover that, it is going to show that lighter background color. All right, so let's come back here to the designer and let's start making this look a little bit more professional. So with my hero section selected, what I'm going to do is give this a little bit of a background gradient. So I'm going to scroll down here, I'm going to select this. We're going to do a radial gradient. And then what I want to do is give this a very slight purple. And then on the other side, I'm going to give this a really deep purple color. Just like that. Now I can slide this over to adjust this. I can make it coming from the bottom or from the top, kind of like the top. So let's go ahead and do that. And then what I can do is I can select this H1 and let's give this a little depth. So if I come and add a gradient to this, and this is a really useful feature. I'm going to add a gradient, and then let's just say we want it to look like the light is coming from the top, just like that, just like that. And then we are going to make this a kind of like a dark purple. And then what I'm able to do is come to this clipping option. And if I select clip background to text, you'll see that it puts that background inside of my words. And so then I can make these adjustments so it looks like that purple color is shining on the top of the fonts and then they're getting a little dark at the bottom. And just like that, this landing page is starting to come together. All right, so what I want to do to finish up this video is I'm going to import an image that I had. So let's come down here to media, and we're going to plug in an image here. We're going to select choose image, which is going to open up my assets panel. And then I'm going to click right here to upload from my computer. Now what I'm going to do is come to my desktop, and I have a SimFlow example here that I want to pull in. So when I pull this in, it's just going to pull in full size or to fill up the size of whatever element that is found within. So with this image, what I'm going to first notice is that it is way too big. So I can come to my image, make sure it's selected, and then I want to set my max width, let's just say to 700 pixels. And so that's going to shrink that down a little bit. Now this falls outside of my div, it's just in the section. So let's add a little bottom margin to the div, maybe probably 30 would be good. And then what I can do is take this image and let's give it a little radius so it doesn't feel so sharp. And then I can also add a box shadow just to make it feel like it fits. So let's go ahead and add an outside box shadow. Oop, I need to scroll down here a little bit more. And let's give this a slightly, like maybe a little bit more bluish color. Right there is good. And then I can increase the blur. And you can see as I do this, that blue is starting to appear. Now, if I adjust the opacity, it'll make it brighter. So I'm going to want to find kind of like a nice happy medium there that looks somewhat normal. And then you can adjust the size as well. Alrighty, I'm really liking that. Okay, and then what I think we'll probably do is add a border as well. Maybe, actually, let's go ahead and give this a white border. But we're going to adjust the opacity so it's kind of faint, just like that. All right, so just like that, we have our landing page coming together. Let's go ahead and preview this. It's looking pretty nice. And we, of course, are going to want to add a nav, more sections. But things are looking really, really good here. The next thing that we would check is our responsiveness. So as you click through, you'll notice that things do change on different viewports. And of course, like on mobile, we would want to make adjustments to the font so it's not so massive. And what you'll notice is that this hero div is looking kind of funky, and that's because there is still all of this padding from our example at the start. So if we remove that padding, things will start to fit a little bit better. And then of course, we can adjust things like line height, and just make sure that everything is going to look good if somebody pulls it up on a phone. Now, once everything is set up inside of here, you'll see that this image is still set to max 700 pixels. And what I would do is maybe just put this to like 95% just to make sure that there's some good spacing in between there. We'll eliminate a little bit of this padding. And then the reason that these things are so separate still is because up here, I have my justify set to space around. So if I want to set things just to the top, it'll slide everything up. Then I'll just make those final adjustments. All right, so if you found this video helpful, please feel free to give it a like down below. I don't do these tutorials like this very often, but when I do, it's just a nice way to kind of help people get started in the tool that has helped me so much. I love Webflow. I love what they're doing. I love the new updates that they're making. And so if you have any questions about how to use Webflow, please drop them in the comments. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel because I've got new videos like this one coming out every single week. So thanks again for your time. Best of luck using Webflow, and we will catch you in the next one.